we needed to give the customer a lot of reasons to want to come to us. And the understanding that I still go to work with every day, which is that nobody needs anything we're doing. And if we don't go re-earn their trust, their confidence, their desire to hang out with us and buy from us, that we're going to be out of business.
You're listening to the Elevate Podcast, and I'm your host, Robert Glazer. Join me as I talk to world-class performers about how they build their capacity and reach greater heights in leadership, business, and life, and how you can do the same. Welcome to the Elevate Podcast. Our quote for today is from Neil Blumenthal. The key to an ideal workplace is one hyphenated word. This, self-awareness. Our guest today, Ari Weinzweig, is the co-founding partner of Zingerman's, a world-renowned community of businesses based in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Zingerman's is known as much for its incredible food as its radical approach to leadership and culture. Ari is a sought-after speaker, author of numerous influential books and pamphlets on visioning, leadership, and business briefs, and a trailblazer in building organizations where dignity, credibility, and compassion lead the way. Ari, welcome. Excited to have you join the Elevate Podcast.
Thank you, sir. Honored to be here.
Yeah, it's taken a while. I'm excited we made it happen. And look, I like to start kind of with the beginning or childhood. And did you have some formative experience with food as a child that sort of ignited this career path at all?
To the contrary, I wrote a pamphlet on food and philosophy, and it came out a couple of years ago. And I think the first line is like, once every week or so, my mother cooked us fish sticks. So I grew up in a family setting that had neither culinary focus nor any business background. So
Well, that is not unrelated. So, everything's related.
Everything's related to everything.
The absence of things are often as powerful as the prevalence of things. So I'm not going to let you totally get away with that.
No, I'm happy to tell the story. But I grew up on Kraft macaroni and cheese, Pop-Tarts, Tang, Fruit Loops, Cocoa Krispies, American Singles, and Wonder Bread. Well, I did it because that's what we had. I used to say it was the mid-20th century industrial diet, but now I've realized of late they actually still sell all of it with newly designed, in quotes, branding. But anyway, I just stopped eating it a long time ago. So really no culinary background. My grandmother used to come on Friday nights and make chopped liver and chicken soup.
And where did you grow up?
I grew up in Chicago.
Okay, in Chicago, so not that far. So what were you interested in as a kid and as a teenager?
Oh, God, it's so long ago. As a kid, I don't know. I used to think I wanted to be an archaeologist at some point. It's a long time ago. I don't know, baseball, football, basketball. I've been reading a lot since I was very little, reading of all sorts. So everything from science fiction to history to whatever. High school, I was probably mostly interested in not being interested. And I managed to survive that and come out the other side and still have a brain. And then I came up here to Ann Arbor to go to school at University of Michigan, where I studied Russian history with a particular focus on anarchism.
Yeah, we were just talking about that before the call. All right, so where did the culinary sort of experience, and I think you started cooking, washing dishes. Where did this sort of interject itself in your life?
So after graduating with my history degree, for any history major listening, they'll be able to relate. There isn't really anything you can do with a history degree, so go get more degrees, which is what I was supposed to do. Everybody in my family had advanced degrees, so I was like the failure of the family for never going back to college. But I mean, now, as you mentioned in your very kind intro, we do a lot of work around visioning, which we can come back to. But when I graduated, I had no vision at all. Only what David White, W-H-Y-T-E, who for all I know you've had on your show at some point, but his books and writing are awesome. He calls it the via negativa. This is where you're clueless about where you want to go, but you're super clear where you don't want to go. And where you don't want to go informs to some degree what you do. So when I graduated, I was very clueless about what I wanted to do, but very clear I didn't want to go home. In order to not go home, I needed a job. I had driven a taxi part-time while I was in school, and it wasn't that interesting. And one of my college roommates was waiting tables in a restaurant in downtown Ann Arbor. And so I went in there and applied for the same job he had, waiting tables. They had a nice interview with me. They said they'd call. I waited 2 weeks. They hadn't called. And then I went back and I thought, all right, I'll reapply as a busboy. Maybe they'll hire me for that. And once again, nice interview. Once again, no calls. Then, as you can imagine, the end of the month was coming. Rent was coming due. My anxiety was increasing. And so I went back and offered to do anything. And they said, do you want to wash dishes? And never having worked in restaurants, I didn't know you weren't really supposed to want to wash dishes. So I just said, sure, sounds great. They said, awesome. Can you start tomorrow? I said, yes. And that's how I got going. So I had no interest in food or business. I just had a high interest in being able to financially find a way to not have to move back home.
So, right. Russian history, your options were what? The CIA, a think tank?
No, the options are you go get my mother, would have loved it if I went to law school. Well, you could do, law school, you can have any degree and get into law school. But yeah, I mean, you could go get a advanced degree in history. You could really do anything.
All right. So you're washing dishes. What happens next?
So
what happens next?
I just lucked out. I stumbled into work that I really love. I came to love food and cooking and the food world. And then also great people. So my business partner, Paul Saginaw, started that same day as general manager. He'd been the bar manager in one of their other restaurants.
So he was the GM and you were the dishwasher.
Correct. So his first day was my first day, and that's how we met. And it went from there. So I started, I was a pretty good dishwasher, as you can imagine. I started prepping and then becoming a line cook. The most recent publication I have out is it's a little chapbook called Life Lessons I Learned from Being a Line Cook. And I started managing kitchens, and I worked for that restaurant group for about 4 years. Paul left about halfway through that and opened a little fish market here in Ann Arbor that's still one of the best in the country. And he and I stayed friends, and, we would chat off and on about doing something, which is a fairly common conversation amongst people who work in restaurants. Most of them never do it, but we would talk about it. And fall of 1981, which is now almost ancient history, I decided, I didn't hate my job. It was perfectly fine, but it was less and less inspiring.
What kind of restaurant was it?
I don't know what you call it. Upscale casual, like not fast food, but not like super fancy either. I mean, it was quite popular, and it did a good job for that era. But anyway, I gave 2 months notice, November 181. I had no idea what I was going to do next. It was just time, I just felt like it was time to move on. And one of those nice life stories that actually worked out. Paul called me like 2 days later to say that there was this little building coming open near the fish market. And he's like, let's go check it out. And he had grown up in Detroit where you could get good deli food. And in Chicago where I grew up, you could get it, but you couldn't get it here. So somehow within like a week, we decided we would open. And somehow 4.5 months later, we had renovated the whole space, redone the floors, the walls, made the menu.
Or how did you do it?
We did an IPO. No, just kidding. We borrowed $20,000.
You sold coins, crypto.
Yeah,
right?
Bitcoin. Yeah. We had Bitcoin, like you could eat it, like Hanukkah gelt. He borrowed $20,000 as a second mortgage on his house. And my grandmother lent us $2,000 no interest, which in 1982 was not insignificant because interest rates to the bank were about 18% in 1982. So that's how we funded it. But anyway, in 4.5 months, we had renovated the whole space. The original building was built in 1902, so it was having its 80th anniversary that year. And we opened up March 15th of 82 with 2 employees, me and Paul, 1,300 square feet. 25 sandwiches on a menu, 29 seats, all the old Jewish stuff we had both grown up with. And then a little bit of what now is commonly known as specialty food, but in 1982 in the American Midwest was mostly just called weird.
So how did you market? Did it go well from the beginning? I gotta say, the restaurant business looks like, from the outside, it looks like if you have a 90% chance of failure, and if you succeed, it's miserable. So it seems really hard.
Miserable is subjective.
It's if you succeed, it's hard.
I like it.
Yeah,
it's always hard. It's never done.
Well, you have to live. You have to live there, right?
I mean, you don't have to do anything. I mean, I like it, so it's fun, But I mean, if you compare it to, I run every day, but not formal races. But if you run a marathon, like for people who don't run, it sounds miserable,
right? So if you build it, do they come, or did you have some clever marketing ideas?
People came. I mean, we've always marketed mostly through word of mouth up until more modern times with mail order, where buying lists and list management becomes much more important. We did a small bit of advertising, but I think mostly it's just the quality of the work and the mindset from day one, the belief from day one that we needed to give the customer a lot of reasons to want to come to us, and the with every day, which is that nobody needs anything we're doing. And if we don't go re-earn their trust, their confidence, their desire to hang out with us and buy from us, that we're going to be out of business. And, 43 years later, maybe that would take a year or two or three, but it's not that hard to go out of business. It's quite easy, really.
No, in fact, my daughter, I was just telling you, I visited my daughter abroad where I had gone 30 years ago, and she kept asking me about the restaurants. I was like, the restaurants they're not going to be there 5 years later, not 30 years later.
Yeah, there's a few that are there, Ben.
Yeah. You're breaking the time. So, all right. So was it successful right away? Was it a struggle? Did you have some near-death experiences? What was the early experience, and could you point to the kind of tipping point?
Well, it's a long time ago. I guess I don't really look at things as being successes or not successes. I have the next pamphlet I'm working on, which maybe we'll get out later this year, is on this metaphorical model of organizational ecosystem I've been working on for quite a while. So, in a forest, it's not like the forest is a success or a failure. It's on the same tree, you could have a healthy tree with dead branches on it. So you're constantly failing and succeeding, just, whatever metaphor you want to use, like in a basketball game. I mean, even the best player on their best night of the year might make 2 shots out of 3, and mostly they're making 1 out of 2 or less. So, we're always failing and succeeding. I guess it went fairly well. It's never easy. As you said, we're in the food business. So it's not like you ever hit some point you can coast. And that remains true in my mind 43 years later. I don't think there was a tipping point. I think it's just, there's constant ups and downs. Yeah, I'd say 43 years later, we're an overnight success.
So when Zingerman became like a household name in other parts of the country, it became a thing you went to and visited. Like, when did that first start happening? Like, how long was it?
April 3rd, I don't know. It's gradual too. Part of our unwritten vision, and now part of our written vision, is that we only do things here in town, and we only do everything once. It's always been my drive or motivation or whatever, to create an organization, a place that was really special. No disrespect to those who open multiple units, but it's never been my thing. I always like those places that 20 years later, you still remember them.
Yeah.
And you have this really amazing experience there. So that's really what we wanted to create. And I think that's a big part of it. And then also, we're in an ecosystem that, for better and for worse, people are leaving all the time. So, at first it's not a big deal, but 20 years later, you've had, 16 classes have graduated from University of Michigan, which means that there's people out, all around the country, all around the globe, even, that have been here, ate here, their parents came to visit, so it sort of builds up this word of mouth in a good way.
So you didn't expand your own footprint, but you started having people on your team, who were entrepreneurial or did things. And unlike a lot of businesses who I don't think would take this approach, there's that adage of that, that CFO, CEO discussion. Oh, well, what if we train them and they leave? And like, well, what if we don't train them and they stay? But you sort of embraced this, and if someone wanted to go do something or start a business, you would help support them and launch that, and then they became your key suppliers, right?
Well, that's not untrue, but let me try to reframe it more accurately. So we did expand the footprint. In 1986, we added 700 square feet. We're in a historic district, so it's very difficult to make.
Oh, sorry. I meant units, not the actual.
But anyway, we in 1991 we expanded again by renovating the house next door. And then the key story is that in the summer of 1993, about 10 in the morning, when I should have been inside getting the sandwich line ready for the lunch rush, Paul, my business partner, grabbed me and he pulls me outside to the bench in front of the deli. And he kind of looks at me and he goes, okay, in 10 years, what are we doing? And I was like, I don't know what we're doing in 10 years. He's like, well, I mean, we said we're only open in one place. We've already turned down offers from other cities because we don't want to open elsewhere, and we won't open other units on campus. So other people are doing it, and it's not as good, but it's still eating into our business. And, what are we doing? I'm like, dude, I got work to do. And he's like, no, this is our work. So in hindsight, in our current language, he was asking me, what's your vision? He didn't have one. I don't think. I know I didn't have one. It's not like we were satisfied with the status quo, because we've always been about continuous improvement long before there was a Toyota way. But there's a big difference, I would say, having done this for many years, between improving what you have and going after a long-term inspirational vision of the future.
Yeah.
So his question prompted a year of long walks, long talks, lots of swear words and frustrations and eye rolls, but still, as we still do today, continually coming back to the table until we could come to agreement. And during the course of that year, we got to know a guy named Stash Kazmierski. He was a consultant at that time for a firm called Dana Miller Tyson. Kathy Dana Miller was known all over the country for her progressive organizational change work. And I don't have an office, but anybody who works in an office, what's their main thing? Get out of the office. So they would all walk down the block to come to the deli and get coffee and whatever, have meetings. And so one of us started talking to him. And he shared with us this process that we now call visioning. At the time, he knew it as preferred futuring. It had come out of the work of a guy named Ron Lippitt at University of Michigan in the late 50s, 60s, and 70s. And he had worked at Institute of Social Research. And it was essentially a methodology that he developed really for communities and not for profits, of getting clarity on the future you wanted to create without worrying about how you got there. So instead of what everybody else does, which is flip back and forth between, well, we could do this. Yeah, but what about this? And then they never go anywhere. This is where you break away from the present, plant your mind in the future, and describe what the future will be like. Essentially, it's a story of the future. So it's not the 5-line business school version of a vision statement. So out of that year, we ended up for the first time writing a vision. It was called Zingerman's 2009. So if you're quick at math, you realize we went 15 years in the future, and it was about 6-page long vision, not 100% how we would write it today, but was our first effort.
Yeah, first try.
And that vision described that by 2009, we would have created this community of businesses, all located here in the Ann Arbor area. I have a strong belief about doing business where you live, not I like to travel, but not to have businesses all over.
No, I mean, we're one of the, I think, plagues of society today is the breakdown of community.
Yeah.
So, and having a place where you belong.
Full agreement. Yeah. And then where each business would have its own unique specialty, so we could keep the deli unique, but still grow the organization and provide opportunity. And where each business would have managing partners in it that had a passion for what that business was going to do and would really be literal owners and partners with us. So that's how that developed. So it wasn't just, oh, Jimmy's good at blah, let's make him a partner. Right. It's Jimmy coming and going, I really want to do X. And then
so did Jimmy, so let's take that through. Did Jimmy see this vision and have that idea that he could be an entrepreneur?
Yeah.
Or okay.
Yes. So I'll give you a literal, I'm sitting in front of Zing Train, which is our training business, which started in 1994. And that started because Maggie Bayless, who had worked with us in the restaurants, and she was a German lit major from Oberlin, but had gone back to Michigan.
You collect all the unemployables, I see. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's the food business, dude. We don't get a lot of, there's not a lot of neurosurgeons that leave and go bust tables. But anyway, we have neurosurgeons we wait on, but not that come work here. But anyway, she had gone back to Michigan to get her MBA, and long story short, became very passionate about organizational training. But she could never find a place that she really loved working. And so when she saw that vision, then her husband, at least so the story goes, said, well, why don't you go do a business with them? And so that's how Zing Train started. So it's really more about people coming. I mean, we're clear this is what we're trying to create, and a lot more people have ideas than actually want to do the work to make the idea a reality. But that's where it comes from.
Interesting. So everyone came from working at the deli, or did some people come outside?
A few have come from the outside, not from the deli. Some could have come from inside. There's now, a dozen businesses.
Right.
So they don't have, the deli's not It's not centered around the Delta. It's a very anarchistic, non-centered entity.
Well, talk to me about this. This is something, well, I could go in like three directions with this. I've never talked about this topic on the show, but let's talk about this anarchist philosophy. Like what's your introduction to the topic, and how does it apply to sort of business leadership and how you operate the organization?
Yeah. So I studied it in school. Since you asked about my childhood wounds, my friend Sean Eskenazi, who would be great on your podcast, who makes amazing chocolate in Missouri, says that our vocation is very frequently built out of our childhood wound.
Yeah.
My extrapolation from his story is that many of us have multiple childhood wounds, so we can have more than one vocation. So certainly to your point earlier, or implicit point, growing up on bad food makes me want to have good food.
Yeah.
But also growing up, having my family not listen to what I was saying probably turned me into an anarchist at some level. But anyway, Michigan has the largest anarchist collection in the country. I went up there and studied a lot. I liked it for many reasons.
Can you define it for people who don't even know what we're talking about?
Yeah. So, after graduating, of course, then I started working in restaurants. When I started managing kitchens, I tried sort of leaving everyone alone in the naive belief they would just do the right thing. That didn't work at all. Then I started reading, Peter Drucker and Max Dupree and Stephen Covey and a lot of the staples of Tom Peters, the, mid-20th, late 20th century leadership gurus, so to speak. And so for years when I would, present, I would say I was a lapsed anarchist because I still believed in it, but I no longer practiced. And that's just sort of how it went along for a long time. And then in, 2008, maybe, I was working on what became part one of the leadership book series that I got going. And Deborah Dash Moore, who at the time was the head of the Jewish Studies Department, asked me, I was already speaking on business all over in food, but she asked me to come speak to Jewish Studies Department. And, I booked it like how it happens often in academia, like 10 months in advance, right? And she goes, well, I want to call it like Anarchism on Rye or Rye Bread and and I was like, oh, that's cute, sounds good. I didn't really think about it. And then when I got to about 3 months out, I was like, like these people actually know who all these people I studied are. I haven't looked at my books in 25 years. I'm going to look like a complete idiot. So I got all my books out and I started to restudy, and it blew my mind. And I'll say this and then I'll give you the definition, but it blew my mind for two reasons. A lot of what Paul and I had unconsciously created was very aligned with that thinking. It's not like we went into it. I mean, he wouldn't even talk about anarchism, but it wasn't even like I was trying to do it that way. It's just what came out. And then what really, really blew my mind is that so much of what's now called progressive business is actually very parallel to a lot of early 20th century anarchist thinking. What's anarchism? Well, there's a million definitions, and of all the words in the world.
Different than anarchy, right?
Things are defined all over the place, and anarchy or anarchism is the last word you're going to get everybody to agree on a singular definition, because by definition, nobody gets to decide. But the common misconception of anarchism, which is 180 degrees wrong, is that it's about chaos, throwing, and destruction. That's called nihilism, which comes out of the mid-19th century Russian work of Nechayev.
Which we're actually seeing a pretty healthy resurgence.
Yes, we are. Today. Yes, we are. And people confuse that with anarchism. Anarchism is really, this is my approach, but it's really a positive belief in people. And it's a commitment to human dignity and to freely chosen collaboration and contributing to the community because you want to.
Right.
And it's about getting out of hierarchical thinking and into really much more peer-to-peer thinking.
Right. And nihilism, you just don't believe in anything. Right?
No, it's just destroy everything, because why not? And yes,
I assume that's the foundation of a kibbutz, right?
A lot of the kibbutzim came, not all, but many came out of very anarchist thinking. So Gustav Landauer was an anarchist whose work I didn't read when I was in college because it hadn't been translated from German, but I have since read because it has been translated. He was good friends with Martin Buber. He was a pacifist Jewish anarchist who was killed in 1919 in the overthrow of the democratic government. He had agreed to go into the government, forget what ministry he had accepted, and then was kicked to death by rioting German soldiers in what I would say was a early rendition of January 6th. And anyway, he and others from that school of thought were very instrumental in the early kibbutzim, and they were experiments in egalitarian living.
Yeah, the difference between someone's trying to explain the difference between is kind of a socialism and that you choose it. You want to be in it, and it's non-hierarchical, right?
Well, there's a million versions of all of it, but if you want the philosophical thing, so in the mid 19th century, there was a big split between the anarchists and the Marxists, Mikhail Bakunin and Karl Marx, etc. And one of the big principles of anarchist thinking, which has helped me enormously in my life, is that the means that we use, so how we go about doing something, must be aligned with or congruous with the ends that we're trying to achieve, right? So if I want like yelling at an employee to give better service doesn't work. Treating somebody with indignity because they treated somebody else with indignity doesn't work. Like if you want dignity, it's got to start with the way I treat every human being that I deal with, and for that matter, every animal or the planet too. And that came out of the disagreement over Marx's theory, if you want all this obscure stuff, of the dictatorship of the proletariat was how you were going to create freedom. And Bakunin and the other anarchists said, that's ridiculous. How can you have a dictatorship to create freedom? And
freedom through dictatorship.
Lo and behold, they were right. So, a lot of the work of the anarchists of that era was to get rid of the state. That's not my thing. I don't know how to run a country in that way, but
you look at it in the context of flat.
I look at it in the context of organizations. Yeah. So like not thinking hierarchically, which is so, like we've been so raised to think hierarchically. It's like that story of the two fish swimming along and the one goes, they're talking about a third fish and they're like, he's like a fish out of water. And the other fish goes, what's water? Even though they're in it, not like thinking hierarchically is the endemic belief that because you're the surgeon, you're better than the person who cleans the room. That because you got to be minister of agriculture, you're better than some lowly little farmer.
Right.
That older people are better than younger. And this is really just honoring that, of course, there's operational hierarchy. Somebody has to play quarterback. Somebody conducts the orchestra. In a restaurant, somebody's running the line, the cook's line, but they're not a better person.
So you have managers though, right?
There's plenty of
it's just how
hierarchy.
You treat people. Like because I am the GM or the shift manager does not mean that you are less than me or I can treat you in a certain way.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's manifestations of it that have worked out well over the years. Like all our meetings are open.
Yeah.
So once a month is our organizational wide meeting. We've been running the organization by consensus of our partners group, which started in 94. As 7 or 8 people. Now it's 22. That's a little told business story because it doesn't fit with the business school version of heroic business leaders, which is me and Paul, but we haven't been in charge for 30 years.
Yeah.
So like that. And then those meetings are open. We pay anybody who wants to come. So, there's small things in a way, but it's a huge shift from what people are used to in most organizations.
That's interesting. So we'll jump around a little bit. I want to go back to the structure of how you do this. So I'm Jamie or whatever the character, and I say, Ari, like I'd love to go build a bread company and sort of supply to Zingerman's. You have a specific structure of how you do this and how you stay involved, and
it's one organization. So this isn't just me and Paul invest in different people.
Yeah,
and that was implicit and specific in our 2009 vision. So it was always meant to be one organization with semi-autonomous pieces. So it's not, you and I are the founders and then we go invest in nice people and they do whatever they want. So when you become a managing partner in what we call the Zingerman's community of businesses, yes, a big part of your work is running the business in which you're the managing partner. But at the same time, you become part of that partners group, which is now responsible for the entire organization.
And you buy into it, or you get profits from the whole group. Yeah.
Well, you own part of it. So some years the owner doesn't get any money.
Yeah.
Some years the owner gets money. Some years the owner puts money back in.
Right.
Anybody with a small business will have been through those. So, but the point is just like Maggie from Zing Train, and just because I started talking about her, like then she becomes part of running the entire community of businesses. So it's not just that they're dealing with their little community, their little business within the community. They're also a leader within the whole organization. So Paul and I are partners in that business too, right? And we use a consensus model for decision making at the partner level, which is how Paul and I worked from the beginning, just sort of by intuitive sense. And now it's formalized. So even if whatever the managing partner owns 5% or 95%, it's still consensus. So part of our success.
And so are they disproportionately incentivized for their business unit or how that works or no?
Well, I mean, incentive is a loaded word because I've never been motivated by money.
Right. But if I'm running the bread business and
you're bonusing coming out of the bakehouse.
Yeah.
But they're still responsible for the whole thing. And then 10 years ago, we set up a way for employees to own a share. It's like a co-op sort of. So there's now 4 or 5 people own a share in the organization. And it's this, we're not selling it. So the share price is $1,000. It doesn't change. And then actually just to really go down a, whatever alley or rabbit hole.
What if they want to get out?
If the partner wants to leave, they can leave. It's just we have to figure out how to get them out.
Right.
The textbook way that we do it is they buy in at book value and they get bought out at book value.
Right.
But then as we've been around for a while, then it becomes more complicated, not in a bad way, but there's more to it than that.
So you said, how many people and businesses now make up this whole Zingerman?
Well, depending on how you count, we'll say there's a dozen and there's 22 people on the partners group.
Wow.
18 are managing partners. And then as of 10 years ago, we added 3 what we call staff partners. And then that went so well, a year and a half ago, we added a 4th, or 2.5 years ago. So they serve 2-year terms on that group as full members of the consensus, but they're not managing partners.
And how many people come through the training? But I mean, you have tons of people that come to you to be trained. Are they big businesses, small? How many people come through the training business every year?
Tons is relative. I mean, compared to Michigan Stadium, we're tiny. I don't know what the number is, but yes, we get all walks of life, as is true of many things like therapy. The people who need it most are least likely to go.
Yeah.
And so, people will regularly say like, oh man, I had the worst experience at that business. I'm going to send them your stuff. I'm like, don't bother because they're never going to come. The people who are already grounded and trying to do well are the ones who come. But we get everything from small business to large. We thought it would be mostly food. I don't know. Now I'm making up a number, but it's maybe 35% food. We get all walks of life. And, I've presented in Ethiopia, Ireland, England, Germany.
And do you have business owners, a lot of owners who are coming and trying to figure out a different way for they're frustrated with their current way they're running their business? Yeah.
Yeah. The other way doesn't work that great. It's just what everybody's used to.
And I assume the visioning is a big part of this.
Yeah. Visioning. We teach servant leadership. There's a group here today doing our open book management or open book finance session, which is a whole nother conversation. So yeah, all those things and then some. But the visioning process, I mentioned how we learned it in 93 and 94 from Stosh, and it has since become, we sort of adapted what he taught us. So we, in a good way, made it our own. But that's a huge piece of what we teach and what we practice. So our vision is written now for 2032. So the vision, as we do it, is a story. It's the story of what you want to create, and people that learn it, and they end up using it not just for their organization, but people write personal visions. People write vision for their relationship. Every project here starts with a vision. Some places write shift visions every day, because it's basically Stephen Covey starting with the end in mind. I mean, if you don't know what you want to create. Love that quote.
Yeah.
If you don't know what you want to create, then, I like to tell the story from Alice in Wonderland, which people might remember, which is Alice is walking along the road, comes to a fork in the road. She's not sure which way to go. So she looks up in a tree. She sees the Cheshire Cat. She asks the cat, which road should I take? The cat appropriately asks her in return, where are you going? And then she tells the cat the truth. I'm not really sure. And the cat gives the best answer of all time, which is, well, then any road will get you there.
Yeah.
So if you don't know where you're going, there's no right or wrong answer. Like, if you are trying to go public in 5 years, you take make totally different strategic short-term decisions. If you're like us and you have a perpetual purpose trust and you're never selling it, you make different decisions,
Yeah. Is your open book, is that from Jack Stack and the Great Game of Business, or?
Yeah. And we've adapted it again, as we always do, to make it our own, but it's absolutely learned from them. In fact, I'm keynoting on dignity at their gathering in September in Dallas.
Yeah, Jack's been on the show.
He's great. They're great.
He's amazing. So I'm interested. Look, you talk a lot about love and humility in business, compassion in the workplace. We seem to be in this bad place now, and ghosting is the perfect example of this. So you have companies that just have people come in and go through 5 rounds of interviews and they won't call them back. But at the same time, you have people accept jobs and not show up for them. People talk about, do we get the government we deserve or otherwise? I don't know whether our businesses are a reflection of our people and our culture, or our people and our culture a reflection of our businesses. It's funny, everyone complains about the businesses ghosting, but the number is actually more that the employees ghost the businesses. So how have we lost the sort of human aspect of the workplace, and how do we get it back?
Well, we're trying to get it back. Being anarchistic, change. I mean, you can guess who I voted for, but people in this extreme situation that we're currently in would have made a big difference. That said, the real difference is going to come on the ground by the way I treat the dishwasher treats me, because that's where people learn how to interact, and we've been trained to wait for the new boss. Like it's a consumer product that I'm going to stop buying Cocoa Krispies and switch to Cocoa Puffs, but it's really not about that. In our work, we teach people that we have a training compact that Maggie from Zingtrain developed in 1994. And what we have long been saying is that the trainer is 100% responsibility for the quality of the trainee's experience.
Yeah.
And the trainee is 100% responsible for the effectiveness of their own training. So both parties are 100% responsible. And I'm going to extrapolate and say each of us is 100% responsible for the whole country. We're 100% responsible for the community we're part of. So if you shift that framing, so instead of saying if this person was in charge, it would all be fine, to I'm responsible for everything, including the behavior of the people who I don't agree with, then it changes the way we
work. Extreme ownership.
Yeah. And Jason Stanley, who writes about fascism, who's a professor at Yale, I texted with him in the fall. And he said, no, workplace democracy, like what you're doing there, is integral to creating a democratic society. Because the problem is people, if they get raised just to be either angry or apathetic or wait for some giant cash out, it's not conducive to learning how to have meaningful conversations with people you don't agree with. It's not conducive. People are trained that the business success is flipping your business and getting out. That's a belief. I wrote a whole book on beliefs. You don't need to have that belief.
They also believe that will make them happy, and I've seen enough people that it doesn't.
Correct.
Yeah.
So if you flip the belief and you have the belief that we have, which is business health means you create something that's lasting in the community, that people's grandchildren are coming into and value in the community, that's unique to the place, and not I love the Grand Canyon, let's open one in every state and cash in.
Yeah.
It's more no, we're of this place. Let's make something special. Let's make something that 50 years from now we're gone, but people are still coming to, and that we're leaving the community better than it was when we got here. Not how do we get the most out of it. And of course we want to make a living. I'm not down on that. And, but they're not mutually exclusive. So I think people learn beliefs. I mean, if you watch the news, you don't see here, we've been running the organization by consensus for 30 years. How come that's not on the front page of the business section of...
Is consensus mean everyone agrees or the majority agrees?
No, consensus means that all 22 of us agree to the decision. I mean, we've made it work. We have techniques that we use to make it work. It's not voting. I'm all for voting in the country. Believe me, I vote. We engage people here to vote and participate. But the problem with voting, which Emma Goldman, the famous or infamous, depending on your view, anarchist from the early 20th century said the problem with voting is that immediately after the election, half the people minus one goes to war with half the people plus one, and that it's doomed. And that's what we're living in, and so consensus forces you to actually have a conversation, to listen to the other person, to hear their fears and concerns and hopes and dreams and vice versa. And in the belief that you end up actually coming out of it with something better that none of you would have thought of on your own. So like if people are working here and they're learning those practices and those beliefs are developing, no offense, but they don't go to January 6th.
Right. Yeah. Right. There's meaning, right? I think there's making a living and then there's making a life. And I think, I've seen studies and I've seen different ones, but I saw one recently, and I'm going to paraphrase because with something like the last people have $1 million to $100 million, of net worth. Like, how much is enough? Like, how much? What level is enough? And what do you think the answer is?
Well, if you I don't know, but it's not. It's a lot lower than people would.
It was basically 40% more than whatever they had at whatever the level was.
Oh
right?
yeah, that's evidenced by turning on the news right now. But
right.
But yeah, I mean, I think I want to live well, and we do live out pretty well by most people's standards, and I live with the knowledge of most business owners, which is that if things go in the tank, which they can. The pandemic's only 5 years ago this last week, where our sales dropped in half in a week. And right now we're I fear about to enter another pandemic, economic pandemic based on what's going on, where, then have a big personal stake in that debt. Like I got to come up with that money.
Right.
So I try to have savings that allow me to, cover a lot of that if I had to go a couple years without getting paid. But so I'm not in the least complaining, but having more money at some point, like for what, there's so much more you could be doing.
Right. You mentioned the word a couple of times. I just don't hear anyone else use it anymore. So I'm super interested in pamphlet. People write books, they write articles. What are pamphlets?
Well, I do both. So pamphlets in 1900 were the equivalent of social media. So it's smaller than a book. In 1900, that was a way for a very tiny amount of money, you could print something and get your message out, and it could be passed from person to person at a very affordable way. So books in the beginning were quite costly. Printing wasn't what it is today. So pamphlets are, that's the historical background of them. So anarchists in 1900 using pamphlets was a very common way to spread your message. It was much more affordable printing. It was much more affordable for people to purchase. Today, I like it because it's much lighter than a book. Some people don't want to read a whole book, but they'll take a pamphlet. And so we do a lot of them.
And how often do you publish a pamphlet?
Well, I publish an e-news, which you can put the link to in your
we'll include that
show notes, or people can just email me at ari@zingermans.com to get it. And I'll send it back to them. But I do that every week, so that's a lot of work. If I get a pamphlet out every year, that's good. And then I'd like to get moving on to the next big book, but that takes a lot longer. And it's not like I'm just sitting at home doing writing all week because I've got a whole nother job that's isn't about that. But I also put out a little chapbook, which is even smaller than a pamphlet. It's a format that's been used actually since 200 years ago.
What is that? A chat book?
Chapbook. It's very common in poetry.
It's very confusing with ChatGPT now. So
yeah, I don't know much about that. But if you do ChatGPT, it'll tell you what a chapbook is.
All right, I'll do that.
It's with a P, chap, like chapter book.
Chap. Oh, I see. Okay. Chapbook. That makes sense.
And so I got a little chapbook came out in December called Life Lessons I Learned from Being a Line Cook. So it's just like a little thing like that, 50 pages.
And tell me about your so how many books have you written?
I've lost track, but I think there's pamphlets and books together, 15.
15. So the power of beliefs in business.
Yeah.
Right. So
that's the opposite of a chapbook. It's like 600 pages.
Give me an example of a belief that you've held that significantly influenced Zingerman's success.
Yeah. So, nothing happens in our life. There's no action that we take that's not based on our beliefs, other than instinct. If somebody throws something, you'll duck. But the fact that I'm on this podcast with you is based on beliefs in a good way. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not paying you, you're not paying me.
Right.
We both believe that spending an hour or whatever we're going to spend together is productive for us, productive for the world around us, and is helpful to other people. Or else, I could easily say what a lot of people, I'm way too busy. I've done 50, whatever. So the textbook story, the classic story I like to tell is, as I said, I grew up in a family where no one was in business. I didn't know anything about business, never even dawned on me. Your kids are growing up with business all around them, but I didn't. And so I had sort of, in hindsight, kind of low grade negative beliefs about business. Like, I didn't really know anything, but it mostly seemed like it did bad things to people. And Paul pretty quickly changed my beliefs back in 1978, because his grandfather had a business in Detroit, and he taught Paul what Paul taught me, which is that business isn't bad and business isn't good. It's just a tool. And that, in the same way, I always say, you could take a hammer and hit somebody and cause them severe harm, or you could take the same hammer and build a home for Habitat for Humanity. It's not the hammer. So that's a good example. The belief that, here, concrete things like open book management is based on the belief. The closed book management is based on the belief that your employees are going to cheat you, give away all your secrets. Open book management is based on the belief that everybody's making decisions all day long, and when they have faulty or incomplete information, they're going to make super flawed decisions, and that people want to do a good job. And when you give them more information, they're better able to contribute. So, those are just two simple things, and then the non-hierarchical stuff, which is embedded in our organization, even though we don't use that phrase, but, it's just nobody's better than anybody else. So my job is to treat everybody with dignity. It doesn't matter if you're about to get fired or you're a partner, like, everybody can be treated with dignity. And then servant leadership, which is a big piece of what we do, is based on the belief that our job as leaders is to serve the organization, not the other way around, which is the opposite of the business pages, which is that, oh man, you started this company so you could flip it and make a lot and then do it again. This is where you start the organization to serve the people and the community of which it's a part. So, those beliefs are playing out all day long. And I never even realized I had beliefs, to be honest with you. It sounds dumb, but I just never thought about it. And most people haven't thought about it. And then what they really don't think about, which I also had never thought of, is they're all learned. And if they're learned, they can be changed. And so I'm giving you beliefs that are well aligned with our work. But, I've changed many beliefs over the years that were unhelpful. And people don't realize that it's all based on your beliefs. And we're trained to say stuff like, that's just how I am. But the reality is, it's not how you are, other than height and eye color and skin color or whatever. But how you are is mostly learned.
No, it's learned, it's experienced, it's the community, it's all of these things. Yeah, if you're not, Derek Sivers is one of my favorite guests I've had on the show. He says, my favorite thing in life is to change my mind. Like, how many people do you hear say that?
Well, this is what I learned, and it's a lot of what's in the book, including a recipe for how to change a belief, which requires you to decide to change the belief before the evidence is in, because part of the beliefs, there's a self-fulfilling belief cycle that the whole book is based around. And part of the belief cycle is that we all, what scientists would call confirmation bias, but I'm just a history major, so I call it a filter. But we all filter out all the information that doesn't support what we believe, and we take in what does. So I like to metaphorically think about our beliefs as the root system of our lives, because we don't see them. Everybody's arguing about the plants that come up above the surface, but if you don't change the root, the plant's just going to keep coming up, So if you're 40 and you learned it when you were 2, the root's been growing for 38 years, dude. It's not coming out that quick. So if you don't commit to changing the belief, knowing you'll continue to see evidence that your new belief is wrong and the old one was right, it's not going to work. So it's hard, but you can do it.
It occurs to me that a big part of your success, to be doing this for so long, for so many decades, is this sort of contradiction of things, right? Which is innovation and tradition, right? I think things are moving so fast. You've got to change. You guys have innovated, but you've also kept some things the same. So how do you know which things to keep and which things need to change?
Well, you don't know. You do your best. I mean, part of what I'll say here by the way we work, and it's implicit in a lot of what I already shared, but so when we're going to make a change, I mean, now, not 43 years ago, but we have a recipe for organizational change. I wrote a pamphlet on it. It's called Bottom Line Change. So it's basically a methodology that is designed around getting as many people involved in the conversation before the decision.
Yeah.
So that you can improve the quality of the decision before you make it. It's the opposite of what's been in the news over the last 60 days, which is where no one's involved in the conversation. They just send you the notice out of the blue, which doesn't work. It just creates what you're watching in the news, chaos and upheaval and a high degree of extreme inefficiency and ineffectiveness, because instead of people trying to get to the same place together, they're all reactive, freaking out, and unable to focus. This is where we all are unsettled at the same time. Your input, my input, and whatever, 30 other people's input comes together to form a better decision. And that when you go through that, there's still gut feeling involved. I'm all about intuition, but my intuition might be completely off base, but you might, Paul and I are very different in many ways. We share values, but what bothers me doesn't bother him sometimes and vice versa. So, if we can get a bunch of free thinking people on board, it's probably good.
All right. So last question, Ari. I would say this is multivariant because it can be singular, repeated, personal, or professional. So you get to choose your adventure here. Okay. But what's a mistake you've made that you've learned the most from?
God, I've made so many, man. So to decide, I would say there have been times where I went against my intuitive sense of what was right because other people said that was right. And that was a mistake. That feeling is coming up now because of the state of the country. I wrote a piece in the summer about why democracy matters. And it's not about politics. Like, I long ago grew super disenchanted with politics.
Yeah, it's not hard.
It's right. But Gustav Landauer, the anarchist I mentioned earlier, one of the things I loved from him is he said, we have no political beliefs. We have beliefs against politics. Now, I'm not saying don't vote. We need to participate. But the key of democracy is not who's in power. It's how we work together. And I started to become clear in recent years, like, we can't work the way we work in a non-democratic setting. Like, I studied Russian history. I went to hear Vladimir Kara-Murza speak last night, the former Russian political prisoner who got out in a prisoner exchange a few months ago, 4 months ago, whatever, over in Russia. Like, dude, you don't talk the way we're talking right now because you risk going to jail.
Yeah.
And I mean, literally somebody just went to jail there, a guy for saying, a priest was arrested in the middle of his service because he prayed for Ukrainian children.
Crazy
and
times.
So this is not just some theoretical abstract soccer game that's happening half a country away. Like, this is how we live. And so I started to realize, like, without democracy, we're not going to be able to work the way we work. Like, there's no more diversity program. You can't have open book management very effectively if people are afraid to talk.
Right.
And so, once again, it's this thing of where a lot of people are going along, and I don't judge them as bad people, but I'm a historian.
No, and that's been embraced by both extremes, as you said, like,
no, totally.
Equally.
Right,
yeah.
Right. And I'm not trying to be on the extreme. I'm just trying to do the right thing. And I don't judge the people on any side of it. I want to treat them all with dignity, whether I agree with them or not is the point. And, but I've been through studying history, and it's hard to tune out 1930s Germany where people went along because they thought it would go away or it wouldn't just, it would all work out. And it didn't work out that great. And I don't want to make a ruckus, but I also don't want to just keep my mouth shut and find myself living in Russia.
All right. Well, Ari, thank you for joining us. You've built, an incredible business over almost half century now. It's not with kind of global recognition. So that's no small feat. And I really enjoyed getting to hear a little bit about how that all came together.
Well, I'm honored, and it's to state the obvious, it's a collective effort. So I'm only one small piece of it. But please, like I said, and you'll put it in the show notes, but my email's ari@zingermans.com. People are welcome to reach out. I welcome the conversation. I can learn from them as much as they're going to learn from me. Please come visit. If people want to buy food, zingermans.com. If they want to train, zingtrain.com. And we're off the grid with the books, so we're not on Amazon. We do all the design and the printing here in town. And they're at Zingtrain or zingermanspress.com. And be honored to help people.
All right, to our listeners, thanks for tuning into the Elevate podcast today. We'll include links to Ari and his work and all the things he just mentioned on the detailed episode page at robertglazer.com. Thanks again for your support, and until next time, keep elevating.